Awesome. Well, I just wanted to take a minute to walk you guys through our audio setup here at Cedar Park Kenmore. So basically everything on stage is labeled. We have the two digital snakes, which are channels 1 through 16 and then channels 17 through 32. And all of our XLR cables are labeled for what input they're supposed to go into. So if you have any questions, it should be pretty self-explanatory up there on stage. And then from the digital snake, there's just one line that runs all the way through the ceiling, through the wall, to our soundboard here. And so I just wanted to give you kind of a brief overview of the workings of the soundboard so that you can know how to run a Sunday morning. So let's go ahead and take a look over here. So right here on these, you can see we have a layer of channels 1 through 16. The button right there obviously shows you that, and then channels 17 through 32. So these are all of the different inputs that we have that we can utilize from the stage. The third channel is a lot of auxiliary channels and things that like our Pro Presenter, the computer over there, is hooked up to right over here. We also have some effects, so these will just leave up at all times. We don't really adjust those. They're very subtle. They don't, and only particular instruments are routed through those effects. And then this bus master is just an overview of a few of the different layers you can view from over here. So you'll mainly be operating out of those first 3 buttons, particularly the first 2. So then over here on this right side, we have this top button is labeled Group DCA 1 through 8. So a DCA is basically just a fancy name for a group. So all of the specific channels can be fed through a particular group to help adjust volume or adjust level for multiple things at one time with just one fader, as opposed to trying to adjust everything. So for example, we have a drums DCA. So if I have that at 0 and then all my drums are unmuted and say set to something like this, but then the drums just need to come down in general, I can just, instead of adjusting all 6 of those, I can just adjust it here with the DCA. So we honestly don't really use drums too often, so you won't be doing it with them. But we have drums, guitars, bass, keys, piano, vocal or vox / talking DCA, and then the band DCA, tracks, and then computer / auxiliary. So with the band one, that is like all the DCAs. So that's just kind of a master in and of itself, apart from the computer and aux, but it's got like the tracks, vocal, keys, piano, guitars, bass, and drums. So this band one is kind of like its own DCA for these other 6, and I wanted to have it separate from the mains just because there is another DCA here, the computer and aux, that is its own as well. So if you're ever, when you come in Sunday morning, you need to make sure that the band DCA and whatever instruments you're using, those DCAs are up as well. So we have the band, keys and piano, and then probably guitars for the acoustic, and then also vocals. So those will probably be the main 4 DCAs that you'll use on a Sunday morning. Maybe also the tracks, depending on who your worship leader is, and the computer / aux. So those are the DCAs. Buses are things that we don't really use too much. They affect a little bit of what's routed to the ears, but not too many things. So I'll go over that in a few minutes. This is buses 1 through 8, buses 9 through 16, which is where some of our effects are. Again, feel free to leave those as is. And then this last one is where our subs are. So you want to make sure the subs are up to 0, and then your mains are up to 0 at all times. Let's see, from there, let's go ahead and take a look at some of these extra controls right over here. What's most important when you're doing a mix is getting the levels set right from instruments to instruments. So like the keys are at a good level in relation to the acoustic, in relation to the vocals and things like that. But there are also little things you can do to tweak each of the instrument's sounds, and so this is what we're going to talk through over here. The first thing is your gain. So to select what instrument you want to adjust, hit the select button at the top. So let's say the handheld mic. We'll take that, and then you can adjust the gain by turning the knob up here or down. Perfect. And so that's the gain is just, it's kind of adjusting how much level you're sending through to the soundboard from the source of the instrument, so from the microphone itself. But then this fader is just how loud you're putting that source volume in the room. But this is what affects the source volume. So this also means that it affects people's in-ears. So if people are like, oh, I can't hear my voice, could I get a little more of that in the ears? Turn up the gain knob a little bit to the point where it's not distorting or anything like that. Occasionally you'll come across a mic or a direct box that a acoustic guitar or keys are plugged into that require phantom power. So to turn on phantom power, that's just this 48 volt button right there. But most mics and most instruments, most direct boxes will not need that. From there, we can come down to our gate and dynamics, which is compressor. So to view those things on the screen over here to the right, you just hit that view button. And let's go ahead and take a look at that over here. So with the gate, gate is kind of a unique effect that we don't use too much, but basically what it does is it affects a certain amount of level through at particular frequencies, and then at a certain volume level as well. So the threshold affects like at what volume level you'll want the gate to come in. So at -64, that means like we can't really hear anything below that or anything. So as soon as you hear a sound, the gate is going to be coming into effect. And then you can also adjust kind of where the frequency that you want it to be at. So gate is an effect that is kind of helpful for something like a kick drum, but again, with instruments we aren't using too much on a Sunday morning, you don't really need to use those. So now let's take a look over at the compressor. So this is probably one that you would use maybe a little bit more, but again, it's not fully necessary. It can be helpful for certain instruments or certain vocals, but this is where you're really affecting how much level is coming through. So if someone is like a really soft speaker and their dynamic range is maybe like kind of down here for the most part, but then when they're like just singing really loudly, they can go all the way up to here. What a compressor does is it kind of squashes that, and it makes the dynamic variance between their quietest and loudest to be a much smaller variance. So what you're doing here when you're adjusting the threshold is you're saying, at what volume level do I want this compressor to come in? Do I want it to come in at -32? That's probably pretty reasonable for a vocal. If you were working with something like an acoustic guitar, you may want it to come in at a lower volume though, especially when there's like finger picking. Finger picking can get drowned out. And again, that volume level can be all the way down here. But if I put a compressor on and say come in at this low level and push it up to here, then that can really help. So we'll bring that threshold down for like an acoustic. The ratio, stick to probably just between the 2 to 3 at most. 2, 2.5, 3 is a great ratio. And then your attack, let me bring this actually back up to where it was. Attack is just, again, how quickly, so this is at what level do you want the compressor to kick in. Attack is how quickly do you want it to kick in. So you can adjust it from 10 milliseconds, or maybe you say, I don't want the compressor to come in until, you know, a little bit after we kind of initially hear it, up to 50 milliseconds or wherever you want it. And then release adjusts how long until the compressor stops coming into play. One of the last things I want to go over is EQ. And so let's take a look at that. EQ just affects the different frequency spectrum, and you can adjust what you want to take out of that frequency spectrum or what you want to leave in. So for example, on this mic, if I just hit this equalizer button over here to the left, then that turns it basically fully off. There's this one low cut thing that I will need to roll off in order for it to be fully away. But if I turn that back on, then these areas of whatever is coming through the microphone will be ducked out. And so that can be really helpful as you're working on a person's vocal mic. Every person's voice is different, right? And so you want to make sure that you're adjusting the EQ according to a person's vocal or according to the room that you're in. So to adjust that, you can come over here and select which area of the EQ that you're working with you want to adjust. You can change where that frequency is by adjusting this knob. You can change how much you want leave in or take out by adjusting that gain. That is saying I want less gain here. So you can see you're pulling out overall level right there, or adding in overall level. So that's what that gain knob does. It's very different from the initial gain. And then you can also affect the shape, or the kind of EQ shape as well from right over here, like how big you want it to be. So that makes it a little bit more kind of flattened out, or I can go back to kind of where it was, a little bit of a rounder approach there. And so you can change the shape of it as well. So that's kind of the basic overview of EQ. One of the last things that I would like to touch on is over here at this, this area we have kind of our home button. So for whatever instrument you have selected, you can see just a basic overview of all the different things we just talked about, like our gain, a gate, the compressor, equalizer, and then where it's going out and stuff. And so home is really helpful. As far as setup goes, that can be where you can adjust the names of the different channels. So let me tab on over here with this page select button to name icon. So you can see I'm working on channel 21, the one that's selected over here, handheld 1. And so I can adjust the name of it by pushing down this button. Okay, change it to handheld 2, 3, whatever, and then I'll close out of it once I get what I want. I can also adjust the icon right there, or whatever color you want it to be. You can invert the color by pressing that. That's kind of cool. All kinds of cool features here in the setup. If I go to routing, this is where you'll see a couple kind of unique things. I mentioned the 2 digital snakes, and so those are inputs 1 through 16 and 17 through 32. But we have the digital snakes here saying, yes, we want to input from 1 through 8, and then 9 through 16, and then this would be our second unit. It reads it as the same thing, AES 50, but on this third one, we want it to be, this is the second digital snake unit, so this is channel 17 through 24, and then I could adjust that to being 25 through 32 as well to kind of finish that out, but we actually have a cable plugged into the back here, into the soundboard in channel 32. And so, or excuse me, channel 31. So because of that, I have it set to local, which means if there's anything plugged into the actual board itself, as opposed to the digital snake, you want it to be on that local thing. The last thing, if I tab over here, all the way over to P16, then this is where I can adjust where our, what is being sent to the in-ears. So on our in-ears, the P16 units that we have, you have 16 different channels. So let me scroll on down here. You can see there's all those different channels. So for example, in channel 7 and 8, I have electric left and electric right. And I can change what instrument I want to send there. Maybe let's say to channel 7, instead of electric left, I want it to actually be the acoustic. Well, I can change what category I'm sending to the ears. In this case, it's a direct out channel. And then let's see, going back over here, the acoustic was plugged into channel 13. So that's, instead of channel 15 or 16, I need to send direct out channel 13. So I would select that, and you can see it just changed to acoustic 1, because I've saved that icon and everything, so that's how I know that it's doing the right thing. And then you want to make sure it's always set to pre-fader. If it's set to post-fader, then how you adjust things in the room will affect how it is adjusted in the ears. And that is one of the worst things for you musicians to deal with. So let me just set that back to channel 15 for electric left. And so that's how to adjust anything in the ears. That's a 15-minute, pretty in-depth overview, but it's honestly just basically touching on a lot of the basic principles of the soundboard. Oh, one last thing. Let's come on over here to the scenes. If I hit view, then I can see my different things that I've saved. I tab over to scenes, and then scroll on down to channel number 15, press that down, hit load, confirm, and now I'm at our CP Kenmore setup. So that's the basic overview of our sound system here at Cedar Park Kenmore, and thank you so much for watching.